What's up, guys? Welcome to the Two Sons podcast.
Please show us some support. Don't miss any episodes. Hit the subscribe button.
But let's get into the weeds a little bit. So, for me personally, the thing that I'm most excited about with this TV series is the Inquisitors. So, we've seen them, I believe, twice before in Star Wars lore. So, we saw Inquisitors in Rebels.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we saw Inquisitors in the Jedi Fallen Order video game, which I played all the way through. You played a little bit, did not finish, and you regret not finishing.
Absolutely.
I did read the other day that they're going to have a sequel, which I'm super stoked about. But
yeah,
the thing that, to me, like by far one of the most interesting concepts within Star Wars is that even the lines that separate good and evil are so thin.
True.
And like, there are examples, like we talked about Darth Bane a little bit earlier. Like Darth Bane is my favorite Legends character who's actually in canon, but the books were in Legends. And there obviously were Sith Lords that grew in the Sith pipeline or whatever you want to call it. But like so many of the most interesting Star Wars characters of all time were fallen Jedi.
True.
And and they're all like good characters. Like Revan, for instance, like saved the Republic at Malachor. I believe it was at Malachor, and then fell to the dark side. And you see, Darth Vader obviously was like a hero of the Republic in the Clone Wars, and then falls to the dark side. Like I've always been familiar, like I've always loved that concept, because in my opinion, like the best characters in any movie are villains that have a tinge of good to them. Right. So like for instance, Thanos in the Marvel movies, like his whole thing is like, I want to kill half the human race, not because I just want to kill people for poops and giggles, but because my home planet was destroyed by overpopulation. And you need to do this to give humanity a chance to reset.
In a crazy way, he sees like the value. It's like a Bond villain.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I've always liked that concept. So the concept of the Inquisitors basically is like they're Jedi that have been captured and then basically like forced through torture to embrace the dark side and or are killed if they don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that concept is super interesting to me. And so what I'm very excited for is I've seen a CGI version in a video game, and I've seen a cartoon version in Rebels. I'm very excited to see a live action, like well-developed Inquisitor character.
Well, and I'm wondering too if they're going to expand on like the hierarchy of an Inquisitor potentially. So for example, like I think of Maul and how Maul like wasn't supposed to be a Sith Lord really, but then he was pretty much kind of a mini Sith Lord, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the Inquisitors, there's like a potential for Inquisitors to want more than what they're given, which would be really interesting. So like if there was like one particular Inquisitor where they're like, hey, I want to be Darth Vader's right-hand man, like I want to be Sith, like that'd be super, super interesting. I highly doubt they're going to do that, but it would be a really interesting concept if they did.
Well, and so, to be clear, the concept that you're referencing was first brought up in Plagueis, which is another expanded universe book, but
another rabbit hole, another episode.
But in the Darth Plagueis book, basically, Sidious approaches Plagueis and says, "I found this Dathomirian Night Brother child." And I want to train him in the ways of the dark side. And Plagueis basically says, that's fine, but don't teach him everything. He can only be an assassin for you, is basically what he says. And so, because there are these boundaries that are set up by the rule of two, another thing we'll get into in another episode. But one of the gist of the rule of the rule of two is you're not supposed to have anybody who's basically a dark side user other than those two people, right? And so they expounded upon that with this idea of like these assassins. And that's basically what Darth Maul was supposed to be. But Sidious in the book would talk about how if he were to kill Plagueis, Darth Maul would become his apprentice. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So to your point, like they had ambitions, but and Maul had. It's been made clear that Maul was led to believe he would be the next Sith, and
Maul
so
had crazy ambitions. Which is highlighted in Rebels.
Yeah. And so the Grand Inquisitor, who I believe was a temple guard, right?
I think he was because he had his yellow lightsaber and like one of Ezra's. Didn't Ezra like come in contact with him? And he was like a good temple guard for a second.
In like a vision. Yeah, in the Lothal temple. Yeah. So what's interesting to me is like those Inquisitors are basically the next iteration of that expansion on the rule of two. I find them to be super interesting. And to your point about the ambition, it's also super, super interesting. But they're basically dark Jedi is what they are. They're Jedi who returned to the dark side, which I find to be super fascinating. I'm just curious to see how they expand upon that concept in this show. It's one of the things that I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for that too. I'm super curious to see how they do it as well. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
What are you curious about specifically?
So in Star Wars, you've got like all these aliens, right? And then you've got all these people and you've got all these ships, and somehow they've always pulled it off, right? So they've always made things look like aesthetically pleasing. What's the type of alien that the mayor is in Boba Fett?
Oh, Ithorian. Yeah.
Ithorian. Yeah. Like that would be a really hard thing for someone on set to create an Ithorian. Like, can you imagine like that guy or that girl was probably sitting at a table and they're like, oh, by the way, you're gonna do the costume for the Ithorian, and the guy's like, what?
It's remarkable though.
Yeah, how do I do that? So I'm curious to see how they're gonna make all of the Inquisitors look good, and that's not nearly as tough of a task is something like creating an Ithorian, but they definitely have their own look. They definitely have their own like pale skin, almost like dead inside look.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Like, well, they're like dark troopers too. They're like dark trooper because they wear armor.
They do. Yeah,
they're like dark troopers like mixed with a Jedi. Jedi.
So it'll be interesting to see like what they do and what they don't do. With that, I don't know. I think that's like one of the easier things to pull off probably, but I'm curious to see, how they make them look like evil and how they make them look cool. I'm sure they'll do a good job.
Yeah. They're very cartoony in Rebels, which is to be expected. Do you remember they twirl their lightsabers and use them as like fly? They like fly around with them, which is like totally over the top. In Jedi Fallen Order, they went with like the gothic route. Like she looked like a troubled teenager. Like she had the dark hair, the kind of like the runny eyes, like in that very just
moody.
Like
she was like always like super.
But I thought that
super mad.
But I thought that was dope. But anyway, yeah, I'm very, very excited about the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
So obviously, Darth Vader, I think, is the part that everyone's most excited for. They've hinted at it in the trailer, even with just the. They like stuck the thing on his arm, the piece of equipment on his arm, and you hear him breathing in the background.
Classic Darth Vader mechanical vibes.
Yes, yeah. Which obviously Darth Vader is one of the best characters in all of TV movie history. So what I'm most excited about with Darth Vader, and I'm curious to hear your opinion, there was a book called Lords of the Sith, which is canon, by the way. Came out in like 2015, 2016, but it's a novel about Vader going on a mission basically to squash like a local rebellion, and him getting trapped and actually needing help, and Sidious coming to help him, and then the two of them end up like fighting out of this whole thing. It's a whole episode in and of itself. But during the book, because this is one of my favorite things about books, is books can take a chapter just navigating a character's thoughts. So you can spend 15 minutes like diving into the dregs of Vader's consciousness and what he's been thinking. And in that book, they spent a lot of time like navigating Vader reconciling or coming to terms with his own evil doings.
Right.
And like he would constantly like reach these like emotional like crescendos and then immediately like shut that shit down and be like, no, like that's worth nothing. Like all that really matters is the dark side. And that's what he would always come back to. And so what I'm really curious with this show is like, are they going to have him be basically a character on the periphery, kind of the way he was in Rebels, where he's constantly hinted at and he has these brief appearances and then there's maybe one giant interaction at the end? Or is it going to be one of those things where they dive into his history a little bit? Because I think the idea of, because Anakin in the prequel trilogy is portrayed to be a nice person.
Yeah, he's
just volatile.
Really good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy who's volatile.
He was young and just madly in love. Exactly.
Yeah. And so like I'm curious, like his character turning evil basically by the way that the Force works. It's super interesting. So I'm just curious to see what they do with Vader in the show.
I'm too. I have kind of a sinking suspicion that unfortunately I think he's going to be more of like a peripheral character, and I honestly think that that's probably the function of the Inquisitors, probably is to still have someone or multiple someones, kind of on the hunt for Obi-Wan. Unfortunately, I feel like Darth Vader is going to be on the peripheries, though. I really get that vibe.
It's a bummer too, because
I hope I'm wrong, by the way, to all of our viewers. Like, I hope I'm madly wrong.
I'm curious to see what they do. Like, so the way they set it up in the Rebels in the video game is like Vader doesn't have the time.
He's kind of a busy dude.
Yeah,
he's doing galactic empire stuff.
Like he definitely got involved when like that Sith holocron was available on Malachor.
Right. Which it took all of that for him to finally get involved.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's the weird part is like, this is Obi freaking Wan Kenobi. Right. This was his master. One of the most powerful Jedi that is still alive. You would think he'd have to be involved at a certain point.
You're right. Maybe it's personal. Dude, that's a great point. I never thought.
So the other thing too is like, so it's possible that the Inquisitors are effectively acting as scouts for him to try to get him out of hiding.
Yeah, well, and there's definitely that like wanted picture of Obi-Wan that looks super cool, by the way. But yeah, so it's
they have a wanted picture of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, there's like a wanted photo it's in the trailer, and it's got like Enemy of the State #1 vibes.
Oh, okay,
it's super cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
So my question for you is, I want you to give me your best guess at a synopsis for what's going to happen in the show.
Okay, like super non-microscope. Like, so we're like super zoomed out.
In like 60 seconds. Like the best you can do in like 60 seconds.
I feel like Obi-Wan does the I'm in hiding thing. Like, he plays some chess, passes some time, watches some pod racing, gets into like sports betting on the side. I think he does that probably for a couple episodes. I'd assume we see some of like little Luke Skywalker from a distance. That's kind of what the trailer felt like. And I think probably pretty quickly within a couple of episodes, maybe Obi-Wan starts to have some contact with the Inquisitors, potentially. Or maybe like indirectly. Maybe he's like a Zorro vigilante where like people don't know who he is. I don't know. I think one of the big plots, though, and I'd be actually shocked if they didn't touch base on this, is I think they do incorporate Qui-Gon into this. Because it's talk about like low-bearing fruit, right? Low-hanging fruit is pretty much when Yoda and Obi-Wan talk, what we see for the last time after Order 66 happens, Yoda pretty much specifically tells him, he's like, hey, Qui-Gon seems to have been able to somehow stay alive after dying. And the word that Yoda uses, like, I want you to learn to commune with him. Like, commune is like the word that he uses. So,
yes,
like, that's
like regularly.
Yeah, it seems like that was like a task that like Yoda had put Obi-Wan on. So I feel like that is going to be part of it. How they do it's going to be really interesting, and it might be just like one of those like cherries on the top thing, like towards the end, or it might be like a huge focus. But I do think we see like a little bit of communication with Qui-Gon somehow. I don't know if we're going to like see it in person or if it's going to be like very indirect. Through like a Force ghost. I don't know. But I think Qui-Gon is involved somehow.
What's the crescendo of the show?
I would think Obi-Wan and Vader.
Yeah, like lightsaber battle.
Again, though. And then
has to happen, right?
Directly after that, Vader and all the Empire forgets that Obi-Wan lives on
exists. Yeah, it completely forgets he exists. And amnesia about the whole incident.
But everyone in the whole entire galactic empire gets amnesia all at the same time. They drink the bad water that is running around on one of their Star Destroyers, and they all forget all at once.
It's definitely going to be one of the 6 potential fixes that Dave Filoni has for Kathleen Kennedy's ridiculous idea for this show. So my theory is one of 2 things in terms of discovery. If you remember in the video game, the kid has to use the Force to save his buddy who's falling. Right. And while that's happening, there are probe droids flying around recording everything.
Which is very Loden Greystorm Bell vibes anyways.
Yes, for our High Republic breakdown eventually. So to your point, like he gets discovered using the Force somehow by a probe droid, which it was hinted at in the video game. I think the far more likely outcome, though, is that what actually ends up happening is there's a scene towards the beginning where Vader goes to Fortress Inquisitorius and says, I know Obi-Wan's still alive. He's the only one I want.
Because he's never felt his death. And he knows.
Yeah, go find him.
Yeah.
Then I will come when you find him. So that's my theory. Now, and then I believe the crescendo will be like probably Obi-Wan killing an Inquisitor or two, and then finally having some sort of epic battle with Obi-Wan that ends in a stalemate, of course. And then, of course, the amnesia at that point.
You're probably right. There definitely is going to be some amnesia, Men in Black pen style things happening. No, maybe not. Again, I honestly think that hopefully they've thought of how to get past this. I don't know. Maybe Obi-Wan, maybe it's as simple as something like, Obi-Wan says he's going to go live somewhere across the galaxy and then just doesn't. I don't know. Honestly don't know how they're going to do it, but we'll see. I don't know. All right. So I've got one final question for you, Jay, and it is, do we see any Darth Maul during this series?
So I'm going to go no, because I've read reporting about it. That they were originally casted the same guy from the Han Solo movie. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we might see Ahsoka. And I'm super stoked about that, because talk about low-hanging fruit. We already know that Ahsoka has literally a lightsaber battle with Darth Vader at one point in Rebels. So there's that all that makes sense. She looks like a grown adult in the Rebels version of the show, right? And so that would be the there's likely to be a bunch of different types of cameos. I wouldn't be surprised if Boba Fett has a cameo as one of the people chasing. They won't ever take his mask off, but I wouldn't be surprised if a masked Boba Fett makes an appearance. I'm curious to see, because here's the thing: all you need to know is Star Wars is obsessed with cameos. We literally saw the sheriff of Moss Pelvo?
Freetown.
Freetown, obviously. Freetown. It was Freetown. Yeah. We saw the marshal of Freetown driving around in Anakin's pod racer engine with a chair on it. So
true. Yeah.
So my point is
and it is kind of oh, see what we did there?
Yeah,
true Star Wars fans, we did that for you. And we're just hey, don't ruin the plot.
Yeah. And that's the thing is there's, I feel a certain amount of that is, there's a very fine line between that and getting to the point where it feels forced.
True. But they're also trying to build up Ahsoka right now too.
For sure.
With her release.
For sure. No, so I would be totally chill with Ahsoka, but I'm curious to see what kind of cameos they have. My guess is there will be at least one cameo that is dope. And my guess is there will be at least one cameo where we're okay.
Could have done without.
Yeah,
Thank you for trying, but we'll pass.
All right, guys.
We sound like such nerds. Sorry, I know you're about to close it, but
you're fine.
We honestly there's this idea that Star Wars fans are just inconsolable and we want so much, but honestly, at the end of the day, all we want is for the plot not to be ruined.
Yeah, there is a baseline level of respect to the source material, and I feel especially as Star Wars fans, we're pretty lenient.
Yeah, honestly,
it's just that you can't have lasers lobbing through space. You can't have you can't have light speed skipping. You can't have these blatant things that disregard basic fundamental, because Star Wars does have some like soft rules in a lot of different ways.
Right.
You know, like there are things that in the Star Wars universe are just like universally accepted as like this. It doesn't like this is a different set of rules than a normal universe. But
Right.
like there are other things that are like very clearly outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And just too frequently that is played with. And the most depressing thing is it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be like that at all.
And still can be quality.
Yeah, there's so many, and also there's still so many things that that they could do in order to get the interest of people who are not like diehard Star Wars fans, right? Like it's the most incredible sci-fi idea that has ever existed on this planet, right? Like you don't have to have lobbing green like laser beam balls just flying through space and like a slow motion car chase of spaceships. Like, you just don't need it. Like, there's so many.
They're staying out the
things.
range of our lasers.
I
It's
know,
not. It's not
like-
even impacting our shields.
I know,
Actually,
we're just outside of it. Thank God.
and like, what if you like popped out of?
ah.
What if you like popped out of a hyperlane, like, but upside down, and like the lasers were going like this? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just disrespectful.
It's just disrespectful.
It's an insult to our intelligence.
I would agree with that. I would agree. Close the show. Do your
All right,
thing.
guys, that's all we have for our very first episode. I sincerely appreciate all of you guys for listening. We are going to be getting into so much more with Star Wars over the course of the next few weeks, including breaking down every single episode of the Obi-Wan series. As always, I appreciate you guys' support, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.